Good morning, everyone. My name is Deacon Larry Ramsey, and I'm the parish pastoral coordinator here at Sacred Heart, and I'm here to introduce the next speaker. He's a vice chancellor at the Archdiocese, and we are so happy to have him back. I now welcome to Father Ricardo.
Thank you. Thank you for welcoming me to my own parish. I've been gone for some time, if you know what happened, and it's the first time I speak English in 2021, so you have to be very, very patient with me. And we couldn't find the talk on Facebook, so maybe the people we had on Facebook, hopefully they will go to the parish website or they will watch it at some point today. Anyway, we had this great presentation by Dr. Dan Scholz. I told you that his claim to fame was that he was one of my teachers. He was my teacher about John's Gospel in the last semester at the seminary, so I didn't pay a lot of attention. It's later that I realized how good he was, and we invited him last year, and we invited him again, and hopefully he will come again. And he's great to give us this kind of overview. And then I can come in this second talk to tell you about something a little bit more specific. And the reason why we're doing this, we're looking at the social Jesus. He mentioned the politics of Jesus. You could use probably either term to signify the same thing. In these difficult times, these turbulent times we've been experiencing, what does the gospel tell us about this, especially the first gospel? So the first title I had, if I'm community, common good, and justice in the first gospel. Then the reason why I had this title is because what we decided, we have a task force here at Sacred Heart called the Social Faith Task Force. We are studying church documents and the Holy Father's last encyclical, trying to get deeper into studying and acting on social justice, the way on Catholic social teaching. And the task force decided to make sure that one of the things we do is that we permeate our activities with this social teaching. So long ago we decided that one of the talks at this conference would be about social justice or social faith. And then I said I could do that. Hopefully you don't mind that I schedule myself. But the idea was to do this. Then I had a very initial title that then when I prepared the talk wasn't really exactly what I was talking about. So I said, I wish I had another title for the talk. And then I also said, well, I can do that. I'm the pastor, right? Reading the first gospel with a social mind. I think this will respond a little bit more to what I propose that we do with you today. And you see, we got a great overview on the first talk, and now we go into a specific issue. But remember, when Jesus speaks about social issues, it's especially important to look at this gospel for two reasons. Because it's the earliest gospel. It's the earliest reflection about the experience of Jesus. I'm not sure if Dr. Scholz gave you a special, I was in and out, so I'm not sure if he gave you a specific date when the Gospel of Mark was composed, but it's for another day probably, but there are several levels of redaction, and the first one would be very close to the experience of Jesus. Maybe 20 years after Jesus dies, for sure. As he said, for sure before year 70. So it's important to look at this gospel because it's the first one, the closest to the experience of the disciples. And the question we try to answer in this talk is, how are we to be in society, especially when we take into account our prophetic dimension, that when we are baptized, we are given this prophetic dimension. How are we to be in society according to the Jesus of the first gospel? And why the question? The question is important in Mark also, because in Luke, as we will see next year, we have the Beatitudes, and we have them in Matthew also. Or in Matthew, we have the judgment of the nations, you remember? Those of you who visited me when I was in prison, those of you, when did we do that for you, Jesus? Or when we didn't do that for you? We have these stories, these scenes in the Gospel of Luke and in the Gospel of Matthew, but we have the Good Samaritan in Luke, a very clear relationship to our social obligations in the Gospel. But Mark's Gospel, in its simplicity, we don't have anything like that. So how do we find that in Mark's Gospel? And before we go to the Gospel itself, it's also important to study Mark because, as Dr. Scholl said, is the basis for Luke and Matthew's Gospel as well. In the synoptic tradition, we know that both Matthew and Luke had wide access to Mark's Gospel. We believe that 90% of the content of Mark's Gospel appears in Matthew, and 50% of Luke's Gospel appears in Mark, is from Mark as well. One thing that Dr. Scholz explained that I wanted to mention also is that Mark's Gospel is beautifully compact, intense, very vivid. One incident follows another in a breathless narrative. If you go to chapter 1, verse 9, when he has already dealt with John the Baptist, in the first chapter after verse 9, you find the baptism, the temptations, then Jesus starts preaching. We're only at verse 14, chapter 1, verse 14. Then he calls the first disciples, then the first healing, then the second healing, and then many who are healed come to him. Then finally, chapter 1, verse 34, finally Jesus stops and prays. And then he decides to go somewhere else. He tells his disciples, we need to go, to move forward. That's the beauty of the rhythm, of the intensity of Mark's Gospel. So if we begin to answer the question in Mark's Gospel, we will find that Jesus is not preaching about justice. He's not preaching about how to be in society, what to do. He's acting on it. He's acting justly, and he's acting in society, as you will see. He doesn't preach about it. He doesn't teach about it. He does it by his own example. And the first thing we see, and we have it on the screen, that's the first in chapter 1. After John had been arrested, Jesus came to Galilee, proclaiming the gospel of God. This is the time of fulfillment. The kingdom or the reign of God, as Dr. Scholz told us, is at hand. Repent, change, and believe in the gospel. So what Dr. Scholz said also, this is a political statement. So you will find the temptation of many to make Jesus apolitical or asocial. And on the other extreme, you will see people trying to use Jesus for their own causes. What we have to do is to go to the original text, and that's why Mark's is especially important, but then to read exactly what it says and to realize that what Jesus is saying here is a political statement. It's a social statement. Society was not the way it was supposed to be, and Jesus is saying, but the reign of God, the way that society would be in looking at the example of God, in God's will, would be completely different. And that's why, as Dr. Scholz said also, Jesus go to the cross. Jesus wasn't killed because he told us to pray more. Jesus was brought to the cross because he attacked the powerful, because he proposed a new way to be society. This is, what you see in the screen, is a political statement. Jesus is calling for a transformation of society at a time where the civil and religious sphere were completely intertwined. Dr. Scholz said that Jesus was not brought to the cross because of a religious position. I think it's both. It's civil and religious at a time where these two spheres seem to be very confused, very much intertwined. What the statement says also is that this transformation of society, and that's the first clue that the gospel gives us, is that it then refers very quickly to our need for personal change. So the only way, or the first thing we can draw from the gospel today is that if this is a political statement, it's a social statement. It tells us about how are we to help to transform society. This transformation needs to begin with our own change. It's the time of fulfillment, a kairos time. The kingdom of God is at hand, but then repent, change, and believe in the message, the good news of the gospel. When later he will be asked what does that mean, Jesus will say that the biggest or the greatest transformation we need to experience is one of love. To realize that if we love God, then we have to love the neighbor, whomever that is. Then Luke will take this and will tell us who is the neighbor with the Good Samaritans and other parables. But the change that Jesus is talking about, the change in society that we are supposed to promote and be part of, needs to begin by our own change and our own capacity to change the way we love and interact with others. So when I look at issues in society today, and I don't need to mention them, you know them, do I see that behind every political or social issue there is a person behind it? There is a personal drama. I'm not speaking about things as in a laboratory where things are there neutral, but do I realize that I'm supposed to ask the person affected by that social measure or that social piece of politics that we are discussing? We also need to realize very quickly that in Mark's gospel, already in chapter 1, Jesus is calling disciples. We saw it last week in the gospel, we see it this week again. Jesus immediately saw that there was a need to call disciples. Don't look at the screen yet, sorry. In Mark, it takes 16 verses only for Jesus to start calling disciples. Jesus immediately creates community. It seems to me that that's also a second reference for us, that we have to realize that what we can do as a parish, as a faith community, is also create community. Jesus does it immediately. And then what we can do to continue in this answering the question about what are we supposed to do in society is to look at the healings of Jesus. And what we have in the screen is the first healing. We looked at what Jesus said, the first thing he said. Now we are going to look at the first healing. Then they came to Capernaum, and on the Sabbath he entered the synagogue and taught. The people were astonished at his teaching, for he taught them as one having authority, and not that the scribes. In the synagogue was a man with an unclean spirit. He cried out, "What have you to do with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God." But Jesus rebuked him and said, "Quiet, come out of him." The unclean spirit convulsed him, and with a loud cry came out of him. All were amazed and asked one another, "What is this? A new teaching with authority. He commands even the unclean spirits, and they obey him." His fame spread everywhere throughout the whole region of Galilee. The first healing tells us that there is a way to create community, that is the way that Jesus would begin social change. But he is in a synagogue, in a place where there was not a real community, but it was a group of people worshiping God. That precisely, it is interesting to see that in the first gospel and in the first healing, what we find is an unclean spirit precisely in a place of God, in a place of worship. We should be especially careful about our faith, that it doesn't make us participants in this presence of evil in the world. A community of authentic worship, according to Mark, will be a community where worship is connected with healing and with justice. Now, after the healing of after this sin in the gospel, we see that the gospel tells us that Jesus left the synagogue behind. We have the option to read this like we read anything, or to give it meaning. What does it mean that the gospel says that Jesus left the synagogue behind? There is some relative term about leaving something behind, even in English, means that you abandon something. It seems to me that Jesus was here leaving behind the ties to an institution that normally or often may keep us from doing what is right and what is just. We also are invited then to look at the first miracle with a leper, something that Dr. Schultz explained also, what leprosy was and the connections with our situation today. We read in the gospel, a leper came to him and kneeling down begged him and said, "If you wish, you can make me clean." Moved with pity, he stretched out his hand, touched him and said to him, "I do will it, be made clean." The leprosy left him immediately and he was made clean. But then warned him sternly, he dismissed him at once. Then he said to him, "See that you tell no one anything, but go show yourself to the priest and offer for your cleansing what Moses prescribed. That will be proof for them." The man went away and began to publicize the whole matter. He spread the report abroad so that it was impossible for Jesus to enter a town openly. He remained outside in deserted places, and people kept coming to him from everywhere. And this is a scene that tells us a lot about what Jesus is trying to tell us, what the gospel is trying to tell us. You know what leprosy was? You know that lepers were supposed to live quarantine, as Dr. Schultz said. But what I want you to see here is that what Jesus is telling us is that the moment that you try to help people, the moment that you try to fulfill your prophetic call to help those most in need, the marginalized, it's about restoring them to society. The healings in Mark's gospel, Jesus takes a person and restores that person to society in such a way that at the beginning of the gospel, the one who couldn't come into towns was the leper, and now the one who cannot come into towns is Jesus himself. So are we ready when we say that we want to help others and fulfill our social obligations towards others? Are we ready for that switching of roles? Are we ready to lose our reputation, our good reputation? Are we ready to get in trouble for what others do? Second is that at the beginning of each miracle of Jesus in Mark's gospel, it tells us, moved with pity. That is what moved Jesus, and it will be the beginning of any social action of any Christian in the world. We cannot lose our ability to feel compassion for others, to be moved with pity for the situation of others. And third is that by doing this healing, and the reason why Jesus couldn't enter into towns anymore is because Jesus is confronting the law. You know, the Mosaic law, the law that the people lived in the time of Jesus. So how many times you hear, oh, these people are doing this and that's against the law. Remember that Jesus had to confront the law, which is the real reason why he went to the cross. He confronted the powerful, and he confronted the cultural and legal framework of his time. Do you see it in the gospel? Here, he needs to break the law. He needs to touch a leper. If he's the Son of God, why does he touch someone? He doesn't need to touch anyone to perform a miracle. But Jesus here needs to break the law in order to bring about the healing that we want to bring to others. What I want you to notice also is that, and obviously this will be the foundation for the story of the 10 lepers in Luke's gospel, one that you know, that 9 were cured, 10 were cured, and only 1 came back and was thankful. That's one way to see how Mark's gospel is the foundation of the other gospels, at least, or especially in the synoptic tradition. But you see it there. How Jesus... part of the healing is, yes, there is a healing, but you need to understand also, we need to see also how this is social in the sense that there is a restoration, but then also a criticism, how easy it is for a man who was being marginalized by the law. Jesus tells him, go back, and he does go back immediately to that system or that law that had oppressed him previously, something also that we need to take into account. The next scene that I want you to see in the gospel, it's about we normally have our own opinions about things, and even the Son of God, and in this passage that I'm going to present to you now, even the Son of God shows in the gospel that he changed his mind. He understood that the scope of his mission, his identity, and his mission was larger and more diverse than he thought at first. We are introduced to the Syrophoenician woman that will appear in the other synoptic gospels also. And from that place, he went off to the district of Tyre, which is foreign territory. He entered a house and wanted no one to know about it. But he could not escape notice. Soon a woman whose daughter had an unclean spirit heard about him. She came and fell at his feet. The woman was a Greek, a Syrophoenician by birth, a foreigner. And she begged him to drive the demon out of her daughter. He said to her, "Let the children be fed first, for it is not right to take the food of the children and throw it into the dogs." She replied and said to him, "Lord, even the dogs under the table eat the child's scraps." And then he said to her, "For saying this, you may go. The demon has gone out of your daughter." And when the woman went home, she found the child lying in bed and the demon gone. Again, restoration, again, healing. But not only the powerful miracle of healing that happens, also the issue that Jesus here is confronted with his own understanding of who was supposed to receive his healing power. And he's able to see through the interaction with this woman that his call was much more universal than he thought at once. An invitation again to see that this restoring to healing, to health, and to society that Jesus performs is just much more than just a simple miracle of the power to heal, and also one that had to do with what Jesus thought that his role was. I think it's an invitation for us also to reconsider constantly our opinions also in social issues. One scene that we see in Mark that I believe also shapes our understanding of what's our action to be in society, it's one that makes us uncomfortable, and it's the turning of tables in the temple. As Dr. Scholes explained, Jesus begins in Galilee and moves in one single trip to Jerusalem, the head of the monster, the head of a system of oppression. And there Jesus sees what's happening in the temple. People are being used and abused. Poor people are paying money to the temple in order to perform what the law told them to do. We see it when Joseph and Mary go to the temple to present the child Jesus, how they had to pay with animals, with a pair of doves, so that they could perform the ritual that the law was obliging them to do. And we read in the gospel, they came to Jerusalem, he means Jesus and his disciples, and on entering the temple area, he began to drive out those selling and buying there. He overturned the tables of the money changers and the seats of those who were selling doves. He did not permit anyone to carry anything through the temple area. Then he taught them, saying, "It is not written, 'My house shall be called a house of prayer for all peoples,' but you have made it a den of thieves." The chief priests and the scribes came to hear of it and were seeking a way to put him to death. What about this Jesus that in this gospel, and that story will be taken by the other gospel writers also, he turns tables, he shows he's upset, he's claiming for a situation of injustice, of corruption. How do we deal with just that Jesus also? As a priest, when people come to confession to me, and they confess, and you may have heard this before, and I can speak in general about what happens in the confession. Many people will come and say, "I'm angry." And I always ask them, what are you angry about? Because it depends. How many times our sin is precisely that we don't get upset about situations, especially when there is injustice, and especially when it happens to others. There has to be a righteous anger that Jesus shows in this gospel that should be part of our way, of the way in which we are in society as well. I'm coming very quickly to the end of my talk. It will be a shorter talk than Dr. Scholes, but I think some of you will be happy, right? And I'm sure you will have some questions. And it's not to forget about the social dimension of the cross, something that we already said in this talk, and Dr. Scholes mentioned also. When you see the confrontation with the chief priests and the Pharisees, the turning of tables, Jesus didn't go to the cross again because he told us to pray more and to talk more to God or to do nice things for others. There is a dimension, a social dimension of the cross that we Catholics seem to be we seem to forget it often. Jesus was brought to the cross because he confronted the authorities of his time. Jesus is brought to the cross because he confronted a system, especially with its law, the law of the Sabbath, a law that made people pure and impure. Jesus confronted all that, and that's why he was brought to the cross. So when I hear that Jesus died on the cross for my sins, yes, that's true, but let's not forget about this other dimension, prophetic dimension, that Jesus historically was brought to the cross because he confronted a system of oppression. So we as Christians, as Catholics, we shouldn't forget this. Yes, Jesus died on the cross spiritually for my sins, but the cross is also a reminder that the reasons why Jesus was brought to the cross on his time on earth are still very present for many in the world today. So we shouldn't forget that very social aspect, that social dimension of the cross of Jesus Christ. He confronted a system of oppression. He confronted a system that marginalized those who needed more restoration in society, the way that we are invited to see today. So if we come to the end of this talk, again, a shorter one than the one before, even a little shorter than I thought, what are my conclusions? First of all, I told you today that the first thing that we see in the gospel is that Jesus created community right away. And I believe it's not an anecdote. I really believe that the best way we can change society is by creating community. And I think you know this. You know it because you create community with your family, you create community with your friends, you create community. So let's create community around Jesus Christ also. And I believe that inspires parishes also. What are we supposed to do as a parish? Create community, to make sure that people work together to advance in social issues, in spiritual issues, in any kind of issues. Jesus is telling us that the best way to transform society is by changing ourselves first, repent and believe in the gospel, but then create community. Second, I would look at the miracles of Jesus that we reviewed today, and to see how in all these miracles there is a sense of restoring someone to society, bringing someone fully. In the miracles of Jesus in Mark's Gospel, you will be seeing a man whose hand is not straight, a person who cannot stand up, a person who cannot walk, a person who cannot hear. All these are symbolic also of the many needs in our society. So we have to restore people to this community we create. We have to help people to see when they are blind, to speak when they cannot speak up, to stand up when they cannot stand. What we see in the miracles in Mark's Gospel is that Jesus restores people to society. Then my third conclusion is that I invite you to read the Gospels with a social mind. That was my second title, you remember? How to read the Gospel with a social mind. And I gave you especially the example of the cross. Do not read the cross just as spiritual, oh, Jesus dies on the cross for my own salvation. Fine, it's true. But let's not forget the social dimension of the cross of Jesus Christ. Our social obligations, our obligations towards the neighbor, are not an accident, are part of the essence of our faith. And the reason why Jesus was killed, the reason why Jesus was brought to the cross, is that those reasons are still very present in our life today. And then my last conclusion, my fourth and last, would be, do not be afraid of discussing social change, because especially for what I told you at the beginning, I can only preach about social change when I'm willing to change myself, when I'm willing to transform myself first. The kingdom, the kingship, the reign of God is at hand, but what the first step that we need to take is to transform ourselves more into the person that Jesus would like us to be. Thank you very much. Shorter talk, as I said, and I'm open to the many questions you may have now. Kathy.
What do you think would be a good first step for someone who is looking to make changes to themselves to improve our social community?
What we have discovered in our social faith task force, is that you need a lot of education. That the issues that are presented to us today, they don't always show the truth. The historical truth of some of them is a little bit more complicated than we think. Things are not obvious. Sometimes you need to know there is a history for things. You look at many social issues, and I think we need to learn, to educate ourselves. And then to be able to engage others in a way that we don't lose them, we don't alienate them. There has to be a way to learn how to dialogue with others, to listen and to find what the real issue is. The principal of the school, a good friend of mine, says that the issue is not the issue. It happens often. So education first. Second, we have to promote our ability to dialogue, educated dialogue. And then I think the third thing that I would tell you would be not to be afraid. If you embrace the gospel and the social gospel more seriously, you will be accused of all kinds of things. You see the Holy Father being accused of being a communist, for instance. You know that this will happen. So you have to be fearless. You have to be able to take the criticism and that you will receive, even from people around you. I think that would be my answer. But remember that in the gospel we saw today, moved with pity. What we cannot lose is our ability to be moved with compassion for others. Compassion means that I can feel the pain of others as if it was mine. Any other questions? I love questions. That's why my talk is short, because I thought that maybe we would have half an hour of questions. Do we have the talk on Facebook in the end or not? No talk on Facebook. That somehow goes something I did wrong. And now I know what I did wrong, so it's my fault. But they can go to the website and watch it. Any other questions? Excellent. So this concludes a little earlier than we thought, our second annual conference. And I want to thank those of you who came and those who watched it online. And we hope that we'll have a third annual conference next year. Thank you very much.